All right, let's jump in. So whether you are here tonight as a parent or a fellow professional who supports families, parents, kids in some kind of capacity, the biggest welcome to you. And thank you for setting aside the time to be here tonight and to be curious with me about this particular topic that we have at hand that is really all about working on and thinking about how we communicate with our children as parents. Just to quickly introduce you to myself, my name is Megan, and I'm a qualified counseling psychologist, and I have a practice in Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I live here as well, and have been living here for the past almost 6 years as a South African expat. This is my first destination that I've lived in as an expat, and it's been quite the journey. And what I'd like to do is I like to provide in-person and online support to expat children, teens, and young adults, along with parents as well. And I've got quite a range of clientele, but quite a lot of South Africans actually too, in particular. South Africans who live here, because there are lots of them here, but also South Africans who are based in South Africa. But then I also have lots of clients from all over the world too. Most of my clients I see online, with a small percentage that I do see in person. And as of May, my practice will shift entirely online as I am going to relocate to South Africa to go back home and to go spend more time with family. As spending so much time far away definitely makes one think a bit about what is most important. The purpose of the talk, simply because I'm really passionate about parental support. As parents play such a vital role in enhancing the support that I provide their child with. And often I have conversations with parents about how they choose to communicate with their child. And many questions around communication with their child will connect to these themes of effectiveness and reciprocity of the communication between the parent and the child. And many parents find it challenging to truly connect with and engage with their child in the way that they communicate. So this evening, I hope to address this challenge that many parents face and chat to me about. One or two things for housekeeping. Please make sure that your microphone is switched off at all times. We're going to have an opportunity for Q&A at the end, where you are very welcome to type your questions into the chat or raise your hand or put up a little thumbs up, and then I'll call on you. You can put on your microphone, and then you're welcome to share whatever question you've got. I've got no issues with camera on, camera off. That doesn't bother me at all. Most important is to just keep your microphone switched off. And then finally, you might have noticed that I am busy recording this talk, simply because it's something I'd like to share with parents who couldn't be here tonight, because the interest was massive, and I'd love to share it with those who cannot be here. Right, let's jump in with some reflective questions to just think about for a moment. And here's our first one. What does the communication between you and your child currently look like? How would you answer that question? Next question. How do you define effective and reciprocal communication between a parent and a child? And finally, in what ways does your communication currently show your child that you are truly open to listening and connecting with them? And to lead us into this conversation a little bit further, I'd like to share this quote with you from an amazing psychologist, world-renowned thinker, and and someone who's really paving the way in helping parents rethink the whole concept and practice of parenting is Dr. Shafali Tabari. And she has this beautiful quote that says, how do we communicate worthiness to our children? Only through presence, our full on, engaged, attuned presence. Communication with our children is about so much more than just impressing our ideas, ideals, or wishes upon them. Our communication with our children has this amazing potential to let our children know that they are loved, they are worthy, and they are heard and seen. Sometimes I notice that parents tend to forget this. And so tonight is really about guiding you in the direction of communicating with your child in a way that makes them feel heard, connected, and worthy. I think it's important to take a moment to just look at the definition of these two kinds of communication that this talk is all about, reciprocal and effective. Let's start off with reciprocal. I looked at the Collins Dictionary to see how they would define it for us. Reciprocal, a reciprocal action or agreement involves two people or groups who do the same thing to each other or agree to help each other, and here's the key part, in a similar way. And then the definition of effective, something that is effective works well and produces the results that were intended. Here's a question for you. How do these two definitions match up to the communication that currently takes place between you and your child? An agreement that involves two people who do the same thing to each other. There's an agreement that they'll help each other in a similar way. And when it's effective, it really works well. And there are results that were intended that are actually produced. The definition of reciprocal indicates that communication is a two-way street in which both parties are seen as equal and where both parties have an important role to play in the relationship. The definition of effective brings to mind a follow-up question for me, and that is, what are my intentions in my relationship with my child? Are my intentions purely to communicate what I want, what I think my child must do, must be, or am I communicating with my child in such a way that I allow them to also form their own voice and identity? Now, very important here, I'm not trying to diminish your role as a parent. I view that as someone who needs to guide and discipline their child. What I'm rather asking is for us to think about how we are using our communication with our child to guide and discipline them instead of forcing ideas, forcing ideals of who we want them to be upon them. There is the fine difference. Now, here is what reciprocal communication could potentially look a little bit like in action. The beauty of reciprocal communication, when it's really that two-way street that's happening between parent and child, is that when we develop this skill within our child, we're actually also promoting other really key skills. With these three that I've listed here on this slide as an example. So when reciprocal communication is happening between you and your child, it means that both of you are present in the conversation and each have an equal role to play in bringing what it is that they want to communicate. And if that actually happens between you and your child, you're actually beautifully promoting social skills because you are present in your communication and so is your child. They get the opportunity to understand your body language, to really start learning If my mom is being really serious in the message that she's trying to convey to me, these are the typical signs that I'll see when she wants to convey this seriousness. Same thing with reading social cues. When my mom has a really big smile on her face and she seems really engaged to be here, that of course means something in particular. And we all know what a critical skill social skills really is in allowing kids to develop friendships and to be able to function well within social environments that they find themselves in. Next up, it promotes critical thinking. Reciprocal communication will facilitate having difficult sometimes, but also reflective conversations where difficult questions can be asked and answered. Reflective questions can be asked and answered because the two parties involved are on the same ground, openly communicating with each other. And then, while that is happening, it will, of course, also promote open mindedness. Because when we have those difficult conversations, but we're having them with our children as equals in the sense of, I'm here to hear you, to listen to you. And I know you are here too. It opens up doors for children to learn that perhaps my mom or my dad's perspective is different from mine, or her opinion or his opinion is different from mine, and that's okay. And within that relationship where reciprocal communication takes place, this sense of open mindedness is being fostered, beautifully fostered, because of the openness and equality that's being communicated at the same time. So when we look at an example of some of these skills, these three skills that can be promoted, it is so important to ask ourselves the question again. Are the conversations that we are having with our children indeed reciprocal, going both ways, a two-way street? Are you talking at your child, prescribing to them what it is that you want them to do, to be? Or are you entering conversations with your child in which you are open and you are present and you're allowing your child to also freely share their experiences, their opinions, and their take on things? Now, how can you promote this sense of reciprocal communication? I've got three really beautiful examples for you here. The phone and the laptop sometimes need to be put down in order for us to be really present and to open that two-way communication. We need to be there, putting all distractions away, stopping what we are doing. And here's the key part, really listening without interrupting. There will, of course, be moments in which you can use what your child has shared to teach them something, to perhaps question a few things. But when it is their turn to share, to really listen without interrupting. And then added to that is the second point, listening to understand. Listen, not to change, not to criticize or judge, just to understand. And when the opportunity presents itself to make a lesson out of what it is that they've shared, or to share some of your insights or wisdoms, do so. But in that moment, just listen. And then communication is a skill. We have to remember that. So setting time aside to prioritize communication is really key. If you want to promote it, if you want to improve it, it needs the attention so that it can be improved. So set that time aside to listen to stories, to have your child share wonderings, questions, particular feelings, and see how that starts opening doors in really facilitating that two-way street that we are after. Looking a bit at effective communication. I've created a table here. On the left-hand side, you will see particular actions that a parent can choose. And then on the right-hand side, what effect this potentially could have on a child when the parent chooses to engage in this action. We've just spoken about setting time aside, and potentially It could really make your child feel prioritized, knowing that my parent always makes time to listen, to hear me out. And of course, like we also said, it promotes communication. The next one is active listening. This means you turn your full attention towards your child. You put down what you're busy with, you stop what you're busy with, and you physically turn your body towards them. You make eye contact with them and you listen. Then you can ask questions, you can respond to what they're saying, and especially do that with curiosity, wanting to learn and understand more. Not because you want to judge or criticize or correct, but just because you want to understand more. And the effect of this could be that a child feels really heard and acknowledged, which then, of course, in return, fosters more communication because the message that they're receiving is my parent really wants to hear what I have to say. They really try to understand what it is that I want to share. And when they are listening, they're there for me. They're fully engaged in what I'm sharing. Reflecting back is a beautiful skill that a parent can also apply, where if a child shares any kind of experience, we can say it back to them. Wow, so you say that this teacher didn't give you enough time in a math test today and you couldn't finish all the questions? Gosh, that must have been so hard for you. I can hear that you said that you were really frustrated and disappointed. Gosh, that sounds really, really tricky for me. Hearing a parent say that back not only acknowledges the fact that the parent has listened, but also perhaps makes the child feel understood, especially when it comes to teenagers who we know will very typically say, my mom doesn't understand anything I say. My mom doesn't understand me. My mom doesn't know what I'm going through. Using this skill really promotes that sense of feeling understood and acknowledged. And then the last one can sometimes be tricky for many of us because many of us grew up in homes where perhaps our parents were never really willing to be vulnerable with us and open in sharing their experiences or their feelings. And so there's room for this here, where if we selectively, when the moment is appropriate, share a bit of what we feel and just are real in that sharing, it develops this beautiful skill in children that is called emotional awareness. If children grow up in homes where they never get to see a parent talking about what it is that they're experiencing, what it is that they're feeling in an appropriate manner, of course, it's very difficult for them to make sense of and express their own feelings. So when the time is right, see if you can work on being a bit more open with your children and real in sharing your experiences too. Now we tie all of this together back to effective communication because what this does is it sets the scene for a relationship in which you and your child can collaborate and work towards goals that you've set together because they know you prioritize them, because they know you acknowledge them, because they know that you're working on understanding them as best as you can. You're going to get that collaboration. Whereas when a child grows up in a home where they only ever hear lectures, they're talked at, time isn't spent really listening to what they're saying, the message that they receive is that their parents' views, ideas, and ideals take priority, making them feel unseen and not really acknowledged. Ultimately, effective communication brings about buy-in and collaboration. Children want to because they know you're really prioritizing them, their opinions, their feelings, their experiences. And then connecting to the last point on our little table about being open and real, I get this question a lot. Simply because, like I shared, I think many people who are parents today didn't grow up in homes where Communication about emotions necessarily took place. And sometimes they did take place, but not necessarily in an effective and reciprocal manner. So here are some suggestions for you. To communicate a sense of worthiness to a child, it is important for parents to also make space for open and authentic conversations about emotions. Of course, it's hard to hear your child say they are really sad, they're not well, or they're suffering in some kind of way. And sometimes as parents, we tend to want to avoid those kinds of conversations because then we feel obliged to have to fix it, to have to cure our child from what it is that is so difficult for them. Other parents, because of the discomfort that this creates, hearing that our children are not doing well, these other parents also sometimes tend to brush it away by sprinkling what I like to call a little bit of unicorn gratitude dust all over it, reminding their child with good intention that they've got so much to be grateful for, that they don't have to feel sad about this. And of course, there's always lots to be grateful for, but there is also so much value in allowing your child to just say, this experience is causing these kinds of emotions, and this is really difficult for me. You don't necessarily have to change what it is that they're feeling, but what you're communicating when you're making space for this is, I'm allowing you, my child, to just feel what you're feeling. And I want you to know that that's okay. Curiosity. Curiosity about your child's feelings communicates to them that you're present, you're here right now, and you're also really open to just try your best to understand what it is that they're feeling. And this will also most likely help them to share more freely what they're feeling because they know you're invested, they know you're there, and you're curious to understand more. So if you have a 6-year old and he is very, very angry about something that you consider to be quite irrelevant or mundane, try to put yourself in their shoes just for a moment. Be curious about it and think, how would I have felt if I was a 6-year old whose little brother just grabbed his Lego right from his hand while he was busy playing? Whatever is angering your 6-year old in that moment is really big for him. And you can acknowledge this by saying, oh, I can see this made you very angry when your brother took your Lego. That must have been very, very difficult for you. Just that acknowledgement communicates to your child that what they are feeling is okay and that you see them in this moment. Being real, our second to last bullet point over there, means that when appropriate, you share your feelings with your child as well, as we've discussed. You probably all know children learn through watching. If they see you sharing some of your emotions with them, they learn that talking about feelings is okay. And additionally, as we've discussed, you give them this golden opportunity to develop emotional awareness, to be able to not only identify their own feelings, but to be able to talk about it, which is such a beautiful and very critical skill for us humans to have. And the last point, make this idea of talking about emotions a regular part of the day. Take the shame away of sharing bad feelings, wrong feelings like angry, being hurt, or jealous. Take it away and just make that space available for your children to share any and all kinds of feelings. This is another wonderful way to enhance communication at home and to foster this essential emotional awareness within your child. Now, I wonder who of you, when you ask this question, and how was your day from at school today, when you pick up your child, who of you get this kind of reaction? Big eye roll, the fine, or perhaps the blank face, just a stare, with the same response of good, okay, or Lots of parents seem to have this experience where they really want to learn more about their child's day at school, but are just not asking the right kinds of questions. And unfortunately, get the same response most days when they pick their child up from school or when they come home from work and they ask their child this question. So, fear not. I'm here to provide you with some different ways, some different prompts or questions that you can ask to learn more about your child's day. Take a quick look at some of these options and see if any of them might look interesting to you. So, what's really important here is that the act of choosing the kinds of questions you ask your child about their day at school, for example, can have a major impact on the quality of the conversation you'll have with them. Perhaps you've pinpointed two or three that you think, based on the age of my child, based on how I know my child, these might be really good questions to ask them. Make sure you jot them down. Perhaps you've also noticed that these questions are open ended. Open ended questions never have yes or no answers, they always ask for more. So, closed ended questions would be like, how was school today? Did you have a good day today? Did the test go well? Was your best friend at school today? Those questions all elicit yes or no answers, whereas these ones can potentially open up the whole conversation. Now, you might notice that some of them could be a little bit more tricky than others, just based on the fact that some could be directed towards older children. For example, how would you rate your day on a scale of 1 to 10 and why? I wouldn't necessarily ask this question to a 5-year-old per se. So also note that you want to choose a question that you know is accessible to your child based on their age and that they'll be able to answer it and just have a whole conversation with you about it. And that's it for me. Thank you very much for being here, for setting aside time in your schedule to prioritize this, to come and learn more about this really, really essential part of your relationship with your child. I honor each and every one of you who chose to set aside the time tonight. And I'm really grateful for having been able to share a bit of my knowledge and experience with you. Before we jump to questions and answers, I'd like to share some really exciting news with you. I believe that the service that I can provide as a psychologist is not confined only to therapy itself, but there are other ways to invest in our mental health, not only in therapy, of course, but in something like this, the Mind and Heart Hub. So if you go to my website, mindandheartconsulting.com, you'll see a little tab at the top that says Mind and Heart Hub. And this is now a space with resources that I've been creating over time and will continue to create, that really is all about different ways in which you as a parent can invest in your parenting skills that, of course, also contributes to your child's mental health and well-being, but also particular resources for your child. To give you two examples, first one is a beautiful mini course for parents on anxiety. If you notice your child is struggling with anxiety, there's a 4-week mini course, 1-pager document per week that firstly challenges you a little bit to think about or rethink perhaps your understanding of anxiety, and also a lot of really practical tips on what it is that you can do to support your child. And as a third bonus, you get a free 20-minute coaching session with me at the end, where you can ask some more questions. We can talk about real life things that happen in your child's life and how you could support them with regards to anxiety. There's also a beautiful journal that I've created for teen girls to just continue to develop their awareness of themselves, of their emotions, that you can invest in, download, print as many pages as you like for them, bind it, and give it as a beautiful gift to your daughter to continue to explore on this journey of being a teen. So please head over. This talk will also be on there tomorrow. So if you've got any friends who you know of, or colleagues or acquaintances that wanted to attend tonight but couldn't, it'll be on there, and it's something that they'll be able to access. And then before we go to Q&A, I just wanted to share with you that I'm on social media. You're welcome to follow me there. I also have a blog on my website that you can subscribe to. I really enjoy writing and try to make it a priority to write content that is really meaningful to my audience. So feel free to subscribe there as well. We'll jump to any questions that anyone might have. Just quickly stopping the sharing. And then anyone who'd like to switch on their microphone is welcome to, or pop a question in the chat, you're welcome to. Feel free. Let's see. Okay. Thank you, Ricardo, for your thanks. I appreciate you being here. And then I've got a question. Let's see. I have a very, not sure how to explain it, but let's say intellectually driven 8-year-old. He's very serious and clever. Feels like he sees through all my tricks. For example, he feels patronized when I acknowledge his emotions. Like when I say, I see it made you really angry when your brother did this or that. Or I can see that you do not feel good about this. You're allowed to feel disappointed. How do I do with this with him? Such an interesting question. I can imagine it must be, quite challenging to communicate with a child who is very sharp in noticing all of these things. I wonder if you flip it back to him. Instead of necessarily reflecting about what it is that he's feeling, asking him to just share. And not necessarily responding with then reflecting, because that perhaps makes him feel patronized, but to just sit and listen and just nod and go, okay. I wonder if that might change his experience or his perception of you wanting to be there for him. That it's just, okay, my dad's just listening. I can see my dad's there or my mom's there, paying attention, making eye contact, really putting down any and all distractions, and they're just listening without necessarily responding. I wonder if that might make a difference in perhaps this triggering, agitated response that your son is showing when you, of course, on paper, do these beautiful reflections that you are, which sounds really on point, but perhaps doesn't suit exactly what it is that your son needs. And yes, you say you are allowed to feel disappointed, and that's so beautiful that you are acknowledging that. But perhaps asking him to share what it is that he's feeling and just showing with your body language, and perhaps that you're acknowledging it, and see how he responds to that. I hope that helps a bit. Kentani, thank you very much for being here and for expressing your gratitude. I'm really happy to have had you here. I've got another question that's come in here. Let me just see. It's a message that was sent privately to me. It says, how do I know when the time is right to ask my son how his day was if he always gets in the car with a grumpy face? That's a good question, simply because timing is important too. Especially with younger children, we have to remember they are often so overstimulated at school, overwhelmed with so much input throughout the day, playing with friends, teachers, moving to different classrooms, different activities, etc., that you then confronting them with the best intentions after school with one of your wonderfully chosen open-ended questions perhaps just too much. So read your child too. You don't necessarily have to learn about how their day was the moment they get into the car. Perhaps he gets home, he spends a bit of time unwinding, and then you notice a sense of space and capacity within him to be able to actually ask him that question and learn more about his day. So timing is really key, really, really key. And if a day goes by where you don't ask that question, that's also okay. Read your child and know when is it the right moment to communicate about something and when is it not. I've got one more that came in here. I find it hard to get my 8-year-old's attention when I want to communicate with him. Then the message often gets lost. How can I improve this? So I've had this question a few times with parents whom I work with, where they have a busybody 8-year-old who's perhaps playing on his iPad. She is watching YouTube videos in her bedroom, and then suddenly mom or dad will come into the room and they really want to communicate something in particular to this child. Depending on the age, I would say roughly anything below the age of 8 or 9, you can still intervene here and take the distraction out of the way. So let's say the distraction is your son playing games on his tablet, is to say, I would really like to tell you something now or ask you something now, but in order to make sure that I can do that, I'm going to quickly pause your game for you. You pause the game, perhaps just put the tablet down next to them and make sure that you're making eye contact with them, and so are they. Just making that little tweak in how we communicate could often really reduce the amount of repeating ourselves, us getting angry to the point that we have to raise our voices, because we are, especially with the younger kids, intervening by making sure that we actually have their attention before communicating with them. Hope that answers that question. Thank you, Elsabe, for being here. Is there anyone else with a final question before we wrap it up and say goodbye? Don't see anything coming into the chat. All right. Thank you again very much, everyone, for being here tonight. I appreciate your presence and your attendance, and I really hope that you could take something home with you. Please feel free to take a browse on my website or send me an email if you've got any other follow-up questions that might pop up in the coming days. And I wish you all a beautiful evening further. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.